if you're doing so many things and you're so occupied all the time where you don't have a moment to just sit down and think about your emotions or even feel what you feel, how are you ever going to know something's wrong? How are you ever going to know that you have this deep feeling and emotion that you just never brought up because you haven't sat alone with yourself? And so many people are actually scared of sitting alone for that reason.
Welcome to Oxygen for Educators. I'm one of your hosts, Michelle Kinder, and you'll meet Chris Kent Phelps in just a bit. It's our hope to bring you thought-provoking, unscripted conversations full of actionable ideas to fuel your important work in the world. Thanks for tuning in. This space is for you. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Michelle.
Good to see you.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Happy Friday the 13th.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Isn't that too much? A little bit.
Little bit.
It's good to see you. Very good to see you.
Same.
And our guest today's a little bit different than our past guests, and I'm excited because she has such a lens that feels very grounded in her generation. She's 22-year-old Zara Jones, and has like some life lessons that translate to all of us, and is ahead of her age in so many ways in terms of prioritizing her well-being and figuring out how to use her own journey in helping countless young women and girls in schools. And so hopefully people will really enjoy getting sort of seeped into that 22-year-old lens that, let's face it, none of us can fake. We can channel our daughters, but we just don't have it. And she really shared so generously from that space.
I felt the same way. And I would be untruthful if I didn't say, when you said our guest was 22, I thought, what are we going to learn? And I learned so much from her. So I was very appreciative that she shared her time with us. Should I read her bio?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. Zara Jones is a 22-year-old author, speaker, and the founder of Blossom with Zara, which is a movement dedicated to bringing self-care and emotional literacy to students worldwide. We'll hear from Zara that when she was a freshman in high school, had a really debilitating car accident and was forced to really go internal as a survival mechanism. And she took what she learned and turned it into a movement for others, which is beautiful. And she shares that perspective with us today. She created Her Blooming Season, which is a 400-page resource guide paired with her signature self-care and emotional wellness framework that she markets to school districts. And her goal, which is very lofty, and I love that she thinks big, is to reach 20 million students by 2030 and equip every young person with tools to bloom in every season of life. Shall we hear from her?
Can you imagine being a high school girl or a middle school girl and being in her presence, and how grounding that would be, and also how like horizon setting that would be? I would just be so like, oh, that's what a 22-year-old looks like. That's what I can strive for. And I just bet she's magic with those young girls.
I honestly can't imagine it, because I don't think there was anyone in my orbit at that age that was quite like her.
Yeah.
Her presence is, you can feel her presence in your interview. She carries herself so well.
Yeah.
But it gives you hope for the world.
Yes, you're right. And people will feel her presence in audio, but if you really want to feel her presence, go to YouTube, and you'll see, just what a presence and what a force she is in terms of how she carries herself. And right next to her, there's another little box of a Schlumpadinka. That would be me.
Give her more credit than that, friend.
Let's hear from the amazing Zara.
Let's do it.
Hello, Zara.
Hi, Miss Michelle. How are you?
I'm delighted. I'm really excited to get to visit with you. Before we got on the call, I was joking that I think you might be like an 80-year-old wise grandmother trapped in the body of a 22-year-old. And yeah, I stand by that.
Yeah, I do get that a lot, and I think I'll be getting that for a while.
Your ability to and commitment to translate your own learnings from some pretty hard stuff to benefit the people around you, and capacity to like turn that into training, speaking engagements, books, like real tangible things that 50 and 60-year-olds can't seem to get out into the world, kind of shocks me.
It's been a journey for sure. I can definitely say that being around some of the people who were supporting me in that time, like my family, and some of my mentors, they were really adamant about sharing my story with other people because it even inspired them. And it's funny because I originally started my brand to focus on students, teens, and young adult women, Blossom with Zara. And it was only focused towards that age group because I was like, okay, well, I started my self care journey when I was in high school, but I am now 22. So it kind of, just builds with me as I go because now I'm a young adult and I'm like, okay, well, I think some of us need a little bit more guidance in the self care space because what we see on social media, what we hear from people outside of our circle, it really does change how we view ourselves and how we view everything else in the world. And when I wrote my recent book, Her Blooming Season, I wrote it again to focus on students, teens, and young adult women. And all the people at my book launch were like, I think I'm going to keep this book to myself. I'm going to keep this book for myself and I'll probably get, a book for my daughter too and I'll do it with her. And these were like seasoned professionals. These were women who have been in their industry for 20 plus years. And I was like, wow, they're telling me that they're going to keep my book because they need it. And I remember this lady coming up to me and saying, Zara, I know you intend this book to be for young girls, but I really do think that adults need it as well. It's not just for kids because sometimes as adults, like we were talking about earlier, the kids get the impressions, they get the last bit of the adults that they're around. So if the teachers are burnt out, it's translating to the students. They're not getting the quality. They're probably not getting the individual attention. They're not getting the energy because we do read energies. So if I'm around someone who is super pumped up all the time, super, just excited about the morning time. And I'm not a morning person, okay? So if I'm around someone who's like, yeah, let's get this day started, we're going to have an amazing day, I'm going to be like, okay, great. We are going to have an amazing day. Thank you. But if we're not around people who are really pumping us up, motivating, inspiring us, and we choose to stay in the environments that are more like, okay, well, I'm going to be more relaxed in the things I do. I'm not really going to have any boundaries. I'll do whatever I want to do whenever I want to do it. It's a slippery slope. And that's when students and even young adults start building these habits of, I'm going to do whatever I want to do whenever I want to, because I don't have the boundaries. I'm not putting, myself first. I'm not prioritizing my self-care. And so that's what I recognized um talking to these women because they were telling me the same thing, burnout in any and all industries at this point. And it has just been something that I want I guess I want the book and the resources that I created to be in every school, but also every household as well.
Mm.
Because having that reinforcement and having someone talk about it while they're in school and then while they're at home, it's teaching the students and the parents and the teachers. I have to prioritize myself so I can show up better, not just for myself, but for other people.
Yeah, that notion that who we are as people and how regulated our own nervous system is and how grounded and resourced we are is the most powerful thing we have to offer other
Yes.
people, the most powerful thing educators have to offer students. It makes me curious about you as a person and how you came to this point. Can you tell your story?
Yes. So it all started back in my freshman year of high school, 7 or 8 years ago, I think. It's been some time. And during that year, I played basketball. So when you're in high school, you're like, okay, this is the time, especially as a freshman. Okay. This is like your prime time if you're in sports. Okay. I need to start practicing. I need to start being training to be the best of the best so I can make it onto JV varsity. And I had all of these high hopes and dreams and goals for that year. I was like, okay, I'm going to start making new friends. I'm going to be around a whole bunch of new people. And um, close in that year, when freshman year just started, I ended up getting into a car accident and I pretty much lost my ability to play basketball for a few months, which really then translated to missing school, missing basketball practice. I was also on select teams as well. So I played in and out of school. So I was playing all year round.
It was your
So
identity.
missing basketball, missing school, it was such a hard thing for me. And it sent me into isolation. I was depressed because not only am I physically healing from a lower back injury, kidney trauma, concussion, I am also trying to grieve my identity because I'm
Yes.
like, okay, I'm no longer an athlete. I'm no longer a student because I can't even go to school. I can't even go to my practices. I can only sit there and watch my teammates, or I can only sit there and look at what my peers are doing and try to be in conversation, but I can't sit down for too long. I couldn't sit for more than 15, 30 minutes at a time. I couldn't be in bright lights. So it was very difficult for me to even be around anyone. Couldn't be around loud noises. So I was very disconnected in my freshman year. And it did cause, I think, some issues for me when it came to social settings after that, because I didn't know how to communicate with people how I was feeling, what I needed, because I didn't know what self care was. I didn't know what it meant to reach out and ask for help because we didn't talk about that in school. We didn't talk about that in any of the other extracurricular things that I was in. We didn't talk about it. And it wasn't really even a well known thing back then. So I one day was like, I'm going to try journaling because I always loved writing. But when you're in sports, at least for me, being a student athlete, really the athlete part came first because both of my parents were on two completely different sides. My dad was all sports and my mom was all academics. So, if anything, my points in the game could not make up for my grades, and my grades couldn't make up for the points. If I wasn't doing well in
Someone was
both of them,
disappointed.
oh yeah, oh yeah. And it was a lot. And I didn't realize how much of a toll it slowly started to take on me because I'm like, okay, not only did I have these high goals, high expectations for myself this year, but I know my coaches had high expectations for me. I know my parents had high expectations for me. So now I feel like I'm letting everyone down. And I'm like, okay, I am not only disappointing myself, but I'm disappointing my parents. I'm disappointing my coaches. I'm disappointing my teams. And it was a very hard thing to even just think about because I'm like, now what am I worth to people? What am I worth to people if I can't do anything for them? If I'm not making them happy in the things that I'm doing, how is this going to work?
Oh my
So it was
goodness.
a
I have to
very,
pause you because I feel like you just said in a nutshell, you like what you were carrying at such a vulnerable age around such an identity hit. What you discovered, that nutshell of like, what am I worth if I can't dot dot dot, I
mhm,
think is a huge thing educators are carrying right now.
yeah.
The what am I worth if I'm struggling? What am
Mhm.
I worth if I can't move the needle with this, undoable job? Like, yeah.
Yes.
And yeah, I did not mean to interrupt you, but I feel
Oh,
like
no
that
worries.
capture is so relatable for our listeners.
Yes, and I can definitely say it does show up in teachers as well, because I remember even having conversations with my coaches, with my teachers. They were feeling kind of the same way I was, because they were like, well, we had such high expectations for you. We know you can do it, but it's really sad to see you in this state as well.
Mm.
And it also, I guess, in the sense, shows how students, the relationships between students and their teachers and their coaches are very important as well, because those teachers and coaches are carrying what their students are carrying too. So not only are they carrying their personal problems, but they're carrying other people's problems too.
And
And
without naming names, who and how did teachers or coaches show up for you in that extremely vulnerable moment in ways that landed and propelled you forward, and who and how showed up for you in ways that made it harder?
so when I was going through my accident at the very beginning, when I was missing a lot of school, my teachers, they were making sure they kept in contact with me. Hey, don't worry about this assignment. We got you covered. When you come back, we'll make sure you have notes. Oh, you need tutoring? Great. I can open up time for you. And I also never knew that someone would do that for me. Sorry.
It's okay.
Because for so long, sometimes we feel like we do so much for others, we kind of have the expectation no one's going to do something for us. And so at that time, I kind of was like, okay, I feel much better because there are people who are going to help me through this situation. And even to this day, there are some of my coaches who support me so much. I mean, even my middle school coach, which, even though I didn't go through that accident when I was in middle school, she, I actually played against her daughter one day when I was in high school. One of my last games, I played against her daughter. So I was like, okay, this is great. We were able to catch up and everything. And I told her about just the entire journey. And she still even follows me on social media to this day, still keeps in contact. And it's really great to see that and feel that, because, again, sometimes when we're in these situations, we don't even realize that there are people that will be there to help us. We just have to ask. We just have to ask for help. And
Oh,
that was
man.
something very difficult. It was very difficult for me to do. But eventually, when I finally started opening up, it made me realize that people will be there for me. And help is it's something that anyone can ask for.
That emotion that came up for you, it's almost like pre-accident you
Oh, yeah.
believed this high performing version of you is the only way you had value, like
Yes.
need nothing, overperform,
Mhm.
I'm valuable in the world. And then this experience taught you you can be vulnerable, you can have needs, people are going to show up for you, they're going to love you even more in your
Yes.
vulnerability. That's a major shift that a lot of like grown 30, 40, 50 year olds haven't made yet.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And it comes up in conversation so much because when I talk to people about my journey through this accident and how I navigated it, because yeah, I started journaling, but it really didn't even click with me a little bit. It didn't, I, I couldn't really understand why well, at least now I can't understand why I didn't start journaling earlier in my challenging time, because if I was so much of a writer, why wasn't that my first initial thought? And then I started thinking about it throughout the years and I was like, well, if you're doing so many things and you're so occupied all the time where you don't have a moment to just sit down and think about your emotions or even feel what you feel, how are you ever going to know something's wrong? How are you ever going to know that you have this deep feeling and emotion that you just never brought up because you haven't sat alone with yourself? And so many people are actually scared of sitting alone for that reason. That's why sometimes we go back to bad habits, people who aren't really good for us, but we're kind of like, okay, well, I want to have my fun. I want to do something. I want to be occupied so I don't have to think of my problems. Everyone has baggage, everyone has problems. There's no perfect person in the world, but we can try to make ourselves as close to perfect in a way that we're like, you know what, I'm going to show up for myself so I can show up better for me, my future self, and for the people in for my connections, for my relationships that I have. Because we also don't realize that self-care isn't just for us, it's for the people around us as well. Because how can we show up and be the best versions of ourselves for ourselves and other people if we're not actively trying, if we're not actively building habits to make those situations better for ourselves? And so that's why I started journaling and really focusing on the way that I talk to myself. Because sometimes when we talk to ourselves and we have that inner dialogue, if it's negative, we continue to just go down a hill of just negative emotions, negative feelings, and conversations with ourselves. And it does show externally as well. And it's known that when you are under chronic stress and anxiety and things like that, it does affect your body physically too. And I I've just seen so many people, and especially kids nowadays, having more anxiety attacks, panic attacks under so much stress that I'm like, you're young. Why do you have so much stress? And it's like, oh, well, I want to make sure that I have, 2 million by the time I'm 18 because of what I see on the internet. And that's where also comparison comes in. I mean, comparison was a thing when I was also in high school too, but it wasn't as bad as before. And now, I mean, kids are getting their advice and all of their information from people who have a completely different life, and they're also sharing their experiences, but they're not saying it in a way of here's the positive things that you need to do, but they're reinforcing some of the bad habits or the things that are, I guess I would say, based off of luck. Sometimes when it comes to being, I guess a lot of people nowadays want to be that content creator that blows up, has millions of followers, or whatever the case is. A lot of people chase what they're seeing on that, but they're not understanding what happens in the background. And I think that's what a lot of us struggle with, is identifying the reality of our own situation and comparing it to other people's curated, edited version of their life that they see on social media.
And knowing that you are working closely with lots of teens and young people right now, and that you were in their shoes not too long ago, what is it they most need from the educators around them? Like, what is it that the educators can do to be a counterforce to some of that kind of like smoke and mirrors comparison, just kind of like the stuff that really messes them up?
I think that educators can definitely reinforce self-care in the classrooms. I've actually had the opportunity to go into different school districts, different classrooms to witness some of the things that they talk about in the classroom when it comes to mental health and self-care. And I can definitely say that there are districts that are very fortunate to have self-care resources and mental health resources, practicing meditation in the classrooms, talking about feelings more openly. But then there's other districts and schools that don't do the same thing. So I think all in all, educators can definitely have some tools in their classroom for their students. That way, they're encouraging them to be more open with their emotions, more open with what they're currently facing in the school, because also a lot of the issues that students do face comes from school related situations, whether it's friendships, relationships, um, grades, comparison, even sports. And there's so many different pressures depending on even what grade you're in, too, because all across the board, it's not the same, but you're always going to face the comparison of friends, school relationship, you know, who's doing better than me in this, who's doing better academically. You're always going to face those. But I think encouraging students to be happy with the journey that they're on is something that they need to hear. Because if I had, a teacher tell me, Zara, I know that you're really stressed and struggling right now on this test, but as long as you keep your head up, as long as you show up and go to not academics, what is it called?
Like tutoring?
Tutoring, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. I don't know why I completely forgot about that word. Tutoring, as long as you show up to tutoring, as long as you show up for yourself and you're practicing and you're giving your 100%, not the 100% that you think someone else would give, because sometimes we are like, okay, well, I think this person's going to do a little bit better than me on this. Oh, they're studying a lot more, but maybe someone has more time to study. Maybe someone understands something a little bit different than you, because sometimes we do see things from a different perspective than other people. And we always forget that because we're in a constant comparison game. And I think that's one of the best ways that the teachers can show up is pouring in that motivation, even doing affirmations with the students. I mean, it might be a little silly for, some high schoolers are probably like, oh, I'm not going to do it. I've witnessed that a few times, but it's a little fun way that everyone is motivated in the class and everyone is holding each other accountable too. And I think it's also a nice way to bring people closer, because when we are more vulnerable to our situations of this is what, this math problem, or maybe this reading is what I'm really struggling with, someone else who may be struggling or someone else who probably knows it better than us can step in and help and go, okay, well, I will be the person to be here and support you. I will step up and be there. And that's how friendships are really built, actually. I mean, that's how connections are built. And we don't really have that anymore. And unfortunately, it seems like it's slowing down just a little bit. Connections are being more online, which is, I guess, fine, but it's like, who's going to physically be there and show up for you? That's what's most important.
Yeah, I hear you kind of highlighting two huge protective factors, that being in deep relationship with the students, and also that's a two-way protective factor. Experiencing the students as individual human beings and that you are in relationship with also is protective for the teachers. That, and then I also hear you saying being explicit with the students about being in relationship with their inner world
Mm-hmm.
and modeling that and
Yes.
coaching around that, and not just leaving it as an unsaid.
Yes. And I actually read a statistic that talked about half of the educators in the US feel burnt out, and in they're probably now stepping into teaching, and they'll be in it for about 3 to 5 years versus back in the day where it was like people were retiring out of teaching. And it's really sad to see because some of my favorite teachers, I mean, they retired, but I'm like, they were great. They loved teaching. They loved doing it. And it's not that people don't love teaching. It's that there's so much going on in today's world that they're carrying, and just like everyone in today's world really is carrying they're carrying their own personal problems, and they're carrying others.
Huh.
And you kind of have to find that point where you're like, okay, we have to pour into each other at this point, because I can't pour into myself if I'm empty. And sometimes we do need other people pouring into us. And it's perfectly fine to admit, I mean, sometimes I need that motivation myself, and I'm in self care. And I tell people that all the time. You can still be burnt out doing something that you absolutely love. And really, you're more prone to being burnt out doing something that you love, because you have such a deep emotional tie to it that you're like, I'm going to work so hard at this. I don't care how many hours it takes me. I'm going to overachieve in this. And when you have such high overachieving goals, that's what happens. And that's perfectly fine. Everyone goes through it. I probably get writer's block almost every week at this point, because sometimes I'm like, okay, I have high expectations for myself. I need to do this. I need to get this done at this time. And we just don't slow down and take a step back and go, okay, what can I handle and what can I not handle?
Hmm.
Who can I reach out to that can pour into me right now? Who can I reach out to that can sit here and tell me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear? Because sometimes we do want people to, side with us on a situation, but we really do need someone there to tell us what we need to do. Because it's like when we're kind of in that, oh, I'm not doing enough, I expected so much more from myself, we kind of cloud our own judgment of ourselves, thinking that we're not good enough, we're not doing enough. And I actually met this one teacher, and she was telling me that she feels like she wasn't doing enough for the students in her class. And I asked her why she felt that way. And she was telling me that the students in her class were just not in the, I guess, where she wanted them to be. And I asked her, I was like, okay, well, did you do anything differently? Are you going to do anything differently to see how they respond? And shadowing her class, they were a very quiet class, very, not talking to one another. You ask a question, and sometimes kids are like, crickets chirping, I don't want to be called on, whatever. And I remember doing an activity with that class on self care, and I was like, okay, I want you guys to look at each other. I want you to look at the person on your left and look at the person on your right, and I want you to repeat these affirmations to them. Because if I have someone telling me, you're awesome, you're great, you're my friend, if I had someone telling me that when I was in elementary school, middle school, even in high school, well, actually, even now too, if I had someone sitting here telling me that all the time, every day when I walked into class, I would be like, okay, I love this class. It's high energy, it's good vibes. I love it. I want to be here. This is my safe space. That's how you create a safe space. Everyone has to build community. That's how you build community, through knowing the common issue that everyone goes through, knowing the common theme that everyone is going through, and then pouring into each other using that challenge. So I told her that a lot of the kids may be going through, these friendship challenges, oh, so and so said that they're not my friend anymore, oh, those good old days. And I'm like, we have to sit here and make sure that these students know that you're not someone's friend. Everyone's each other's friend. You have to be there, you have to show up, you have to connect with others, because that is how we also go to the right people when we need help. Because I've witnessed some situations where people will go to the wrong groups, to the wrong friends when they need advice, and they're steered the wrong way because they didn't build that community. And I think that's why it's also so important for teachers, and people in the education space, adults in the education space, to step up and recognize when students are going through silent struggles, whether they're, this bright student that shows up to class all the time, and maybe one day they are super quiet, they don't want to talk to anyone, or maybe they're super angry. Maybe stopping them after class and going, "Hey, I noticed that you were a little different today. What's going on?" Because maybe even just starting that conversation lifts so much weight off of these kids' shoulders.
Yeah, to
And
not feel invisible, to feel
yes.
seen, and
Oh,
that
yeah.
that it was noticed that there was a
Exactly.
shift in me.
Exactly.
Hi, I'm Katie Worden, producer of Oxygen for Educators. I want to spotlight our sponsor, TackyBox. TackyBox is an elementary school program that pairs innovative content with a tactile tool in daily practice to teach children to self-monitor their own words and actions and their responses to others. It's a proven tool that reduces behavior incidents by 66%. Through daily self-reflection, students build self-awareness, self-regulation, and meaningful connections. TackyBox is a light lift for teachers with a big impact on student well-being. Go to tackybox.com to learn more and become a TackyBox district.
I have a question for you that I feel like you're uniquely qualified to kind of like lift the veil and help those of us that are older see things a little differently. Taking into account all of the students you work with and your own experience as a student, what is it that older adults are just kind of tone deaf to around this notion of self-care, well-being, community building, all of the things we've talked about? What do we need to clean our ears out about? Like, what are we completely missing about the experience of this generation of students?
That's a great question. And I think there's a huge misconception about self-care and mental health overall, in the education space and outside of it. The not really knowing how to navigate mental health and self-care, not knowing the conversations to have, and also not knowing the importance. Because sometimes, especially like as a Gen Zer, just hearing that, oh, well, I feel like the younger generation is more focused on boundaries, and they don't want to work and they don't want to do certain things. There's a misconception of they don't want to do things anymore. And that's not necessarily the reason. On the flip side, it's like, oh, well, I've seen, as a Gen Z and younger generations, they're probably seeing their parents, their older siblings, people older than them going through so much situations of burnout, stress, and other issues relating to that in and out of the household, that they're probably like, I don't want to end up being stressed or burnt out like this person. So I have to either protect my peace, I have to set better boundaries. And that's where it starts coming into the schools, the workspaces, and just everything in life at this point. That's where that perspective comes in from the younger generation. So I think to really connect the bridge on that is to have an open conversation about how comfort looks to them. What does comfort and what does a safe space look like to them? Because even if it's different for everyone, a lot of people will probably say a safe space is a place where they can sit here and say, or really be honest with how they feel about something, be transparent about what they're going through, or feel safe enough to go to a person and have a conversation with them about what they're going through and get the advice that they're looking for, the correct and healthy advice that they're looking for. And I think that's the best way to really mend that bridge, and really build community with the teachers, with the adults in the education space to the students, is making sure that there is the inclusive questions of what does a safe space look like to you, and how can I create a safe space for my students in general.
It's very interesting. I hear you encouraging us to do two things. One, dig deeper around how younger generations think and feel about work and boundaries and protecting energy and all that, like not just assume they're operating from the same lens or landscape that older generations are, and really go for the understanding. The other thing I heard you say is us taking care of our own selves so that we can come into our own work life day after day from a resourced, vibrant, excited place allows for them to see, oh, this isn't something I need to fear. I have some models, and they're not all, crawling through a desert praying for death kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. And it's so funny because I remember asking a group of girls, and we were having a blossom circle, and it was just a few girls on there, and they're in their last year of middle school going into high school. So they're facing,
Sweet
the issues
babies.
of friends and okay, well, who am I? What am I going to do? Who are going to be my friends? I'm going to a new school. How is this all going to go? And we all had a conversation about what does comfort look like to them in their own space. And a lot of them wanted more quietness. They wanted more relaxation in a way that it's not, I wouldn't say high energy, because to me, high energy is like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
great. Yeah, I'm going to be my own cheerleader. But they wanted a calm space,
Yeah, like
really.
a
They wanted,
break from the
yes.
stimulus.
Oh, yeah. And a lot
Yeah.
of it comes from also in the households too, because the students, I mean, they're going from the house to school, and sometimes their emotions they trickle down to, their friends, to the teachers. And sometimes kids are going to lash out. Sometimes there's going to be arguments. There's going to be things that are said that are a little hurtful. And we do take them personally. And it's not that, you know, how can I put it into good words? It's not that they mean to do it. It's that there's no emotional regulation for them. They probably don't even know what emotional regulation is. They don't know how to navigate their emotions and go, okay, I understand what I'm going through. I acknowledge the feeling. How do I navigate the situation? How do I make myself go through this challenge in a better outlook? How do I do that? There's no practice in the household when it comes to that. So sometimes you do have to reinforce it in the classrooms. So that's why I love going to schools for like career day or anything, and just seeing these posters that are either in the hallway or in the schools of take a deep breath before you walk into the classroom, breathe in for 5 seconds, breathe out for 5 seconds. I mean, I love seeing it because it's like that's exactly what these kids need, is to practice and have these habits when they're younger.
Mm.
That way, when they're older, it's like, I have I have these habits and I know how to navigate through these challenges. I'm building resilience because and sometimes we think that resilience is, oh, I went through this issue. It is what it is. I'm just going to move on from it, whatever. But resilience is, I'm going to acknowledge the issue. I'm going to pinpoint what my problem is, what I am going through, what I'm feeling. And then I'm going to start, either writing out or telling myself, how do I get through this? What do I need? Do I need to take a step back and look at the bigger picture? Do I need to focus more on a specific piece? What is it that I need right now? That is resilience. And I think that's also what needs to be talked in the classroom too. Well, needs to be talked about in the classroom as well, is building resilience, that it's not a skill that you're born with. It's a skill that you build throughout the years. And that's why I choose to focus so much on students and teens and young adult women, because you are entering different, completely different stages of your life, whether you are going from middle school to high school to college, or some other extended education, or into work. You are going through different life stages, and you're going to have to build resilience in order to really navigate life just in general, because it makes life so much more easier to navigate when we know what resilience is and how it works. And I think that's like the number one thing. If I were to give anyone kind of like a, hey, what do you need to teach in the classroom? Resilience. Resilience and self-love.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, pivoting a little to close us out. So many educators, and I know you see this too, they come from a place of such deep commitment that they have almost positioned themselves as sacrificial lambs.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no amount of content research narrative that's going to convince them to put themselves first in order to best serve others. They just can't get there. For those folks, what I think does open their eyes and hearts and minds about their own needs and caring for them is if they can see the connection of how it impacts their students. So from your lens of being in the classroom not that long ago, what is the impact of someone at the front of the room who has no self-care, a dysregulated nervous system, is kind of leaking and fraying, even if they're deeply committed? What's that impact on the students? And then what is the impact on the students of having that regulated nervous system in the room?
So when the teachers aren't prioritizing themselves and prioritizing their self-love and their emotions, students it affects their performance. Like it affects the teacher's performance directly, because they're probably not showing up, 100%. They're not showing up as their best selves. They're probably not showing up in the energy that they need to bring. And for the students, and they kind of also maybe made distance themselves, because a lot of us have that natural thing of, when we are upset, angry, we'll distance ourselves. And when that happens and the teacher is in that feeling, the students may feel it, whether it's through the energy, when they're walking through the classroom and they're not having the teacher that usually says, hi, good morning, really pumped up in the morning. Maybe they're not seeing that same teacher, and they're like, okay, something's wrong. So now they're probably thinking, okay, something's wrong with our teacher, something's going on. Or maybe they're asking questions and they're not getting the best answers, or maybe it's kind of like, yeah, we'll go over that later. Because when we're going through so much mentally, when things start stacking up on us mentally and we're going to have to think a little bit more, do a little bit more, we're like, oh, I don't have the mental capacity for it. And that's how it translates to the students, because it does pour into their performance, because now they're probably like, oh, I don't want to bother you and ask you any questions because I know you're upset. Or maybe you're even missing school because you're super stressed over a situation, or maybe you've been stressed for days and it took a toll on your body. And now you're like, okay, now I need rest. I need to take a day off. So now your students are missing you because you are going through that challenging piece of, I'm stressed. I have chronic stress. I'm anxious about something. And it does pour into that space. And when students don't have someone that's, I guess, like showing up for them in that way, it does make them also feel like they're doing something wrong in a sense. And I guess it also depends on the way that these students grow up, because sometimes if you're, I guess, in a household where you're really into everyone's emotions because you're like, oh, I'm walking on eggshells, I don't really know what's going on. Maybe when you see that same pattern in your teacher of, now I have to walk on eggshells because I don't really know what's wrong, I don't want her to explode on me, that's where I guess some other things actually start popping up from the household to the school as well, and going back from the school to the household.
Wow.
So, and I think just in general, that's how it is for everyone's connection. It's, if we're not prioritizing ourselves, if we're not prioritizing our emotions or mental health, we are not showing up externally for in the best way that we can be, because we're not 100% there. We're not 100% focused on the situation that we're in. We're not focused in, our mind isn't in the present. It's more on the past, the situation, or the future, what's going to happen, all the stress that comes with that. And hopefully I answered your question probably in the long way, but that's how it
No.
goes into it.
Yeah, no, that was really interesting, and I appreciate the compassion of the way you framed your answer, because it's like an invitation to educators to know how much it matters so that they will feel motivated to care for themselves. And at the same time, there's kind of an underlying understanding of why they might be feeling completely under-resourced, completely frayed, completely overwhelmed because of external or systemic or structural factors that are out of their control.
Yes.
So like I hear in your answer a real sensitivity to that, of like, of course they feel that way, and please be motivated to do the work because it really matters to your students.
Yes.
Way more than any content that you'll ever present. How you show up as a nervous system matters more to that child's development than anything else.
Yes.
And then what about the experience of the students you work with, and the experience of you as a student when you're in the room with someone who's done their own work or is doing their own work?
It is a night and day difference for sure. You can always tell someone that, you can always kind of tell when someone's doing the work, even if you don't know that person, even if you don't talk to that person every single day. There is a way that people show up when they are working on themselves. It's in their confidence, it is in the way that they talk, it is in the way that they do things, that they do things in an unapologetic way. And it's also why I created my brand Blossom with Zara, to have the word blossom in it, because I believe that we're all kind of like flowers. And in order for flowers to grow, in order for them to blossom into their beautiful selves, they have to be rooted first. You don't plant a seed and then the next day it's like, oh, I got a flower. You're not going to have that. It has to first really ground its roots. It's got to grow. And then it has to be structured. You have to nurture it. whether it is pruning, making sure the soil is good, making sure you have the right soil, it's in the right environment, it has enough sunlight, you're pouring water into it. You have to make sure you're doing all these different things, and that's how we should treat ourselves. And I feel like when you are so deeply rooted in yourself, nothing can shake you. And it's in the way that I guess people who practice mental health self-care every day or even every week, because sometimes it can be a little different for us, we all have different routines, it really does show up in how they treat themselves and what they allow from others as well. Because I'm a firm believer that you treat yourself the way that other people treat you. If you are allowing people to constantly cross your boundaries, you know, tell you that they're going to do something and then they turn around and don't do it, and it's like they're infamous for doing that all the time, you probably do that to yourself as well, because you probably go, oh, well, I know I should sleep early, but I'll go to sleep at 1 o'clock in the morning. I'll do a little bit more work. It's fine. And when you start telling yourself something completely different from what you know you're supposed to do, it actually impacts you negatively, because now you aren't even listening to your boundaries. You're not even focusing on yourself. You're not pouring into yourself. And so that's why that's like the night and day difference of someone who practices self-care and someone who doesn't or isn't familiar with self-care. I know the difference between me today and me who would have never been in the self-care space. I think I would be a completely different person. I probably would be completely burnt out, and I would be like, okay, well, this is what life's throwing at me. It is what it is. And taking it in a completely different direction rather than sitting here and going, okay, Zara, what do you need to do? What is going to make you feel a little bit more comfortable in this situation? Who's someone that you can call and ask for advice, ask for help? That me, if I were to go back to my 15, 16-year-old self, I would have never really even known that this whole entire thing existed. I would have never known what self-care is, because that was me. Like when you actually think about it, that was me, because I didn't know what self-care was. I was just piling everything on me and going, okay,
I can
well,
do it.
I have a jam-packed schedule. It is what it is. I'll probably just go to sleep later. And if I'm stressed, I'll just go play basketball. I'll just go watch a movie. I'll just go distract myself. And that's what it is. When you don't practice self-care, you're constantly trying to fill a void that you should focus on and really sit there and go, okay, why am I feeling this way? Instead of sitting there thinking about it, you're filling it with distractions.
Wow. Okay. So Sharon Bradley, who's the one who nominated you to be a guest, she talked about herself pre having cancer and then post. And I asked her, like, was there anything someone could have said to you before the cancer that kind of reorganized her priorities that would have gotten your attention? And her first answer was no, really no, nothing could have gotten my attention. As she talked, she said, if someone had said to me, pause, just pause, that might have created enough space for me to make some different decisions. Same question for you. There was Zara before Zara. We had this big conversation before we got on, and I still messed it up. Zara before car accident, and then Zara after. So what I'm curious about is there anything someone could have said to get your attention, to put you on a path toward better self-care that didn't involve a car accident? I just would love for as many people as possible to learn without the cancer, without the car accidents, to
Yes.
get a foothold. But is there such a thing without the wake-up call?
I think that's such a great question, because I think if someone at that time, day, and age, knowing what I knew then and not knowing what I didn't know, I think if someone were to tell me you need to pause, I would have been like, you're crazy. Have you seen my schedule? And because I grew up in such a high energy, high achieving family who's like, okay, we need to do this. It's a Sunday. I don't care. We're still going to do all these different things. And I guess because I grew up in that environment, I expected that of myself. So if someone were to tell me, even the greatest mentor in the world, if they were to tell me, Zara, you need to pause, you need to take a step back, I would have been like, this is the most ridiculous advice I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Because it's like I'm losing time.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side, I feel like I've gained time because I now have boundaries. I now understand what I need to do, what I need to focus on, and how I should stop. Even if I'm sitting at my desk and I'm like, okay, this project is really taking a toll on me, I need 15 minutes. I can do that. And I just would have never, ever would have thought that I would have been that person who's like, I need a break, because I wasn't before. And yeah, sure, we could say, oh, well, Zara, you were 16 at the time. Of course you had all that energy. I still have a whole bunch of energy now, but I'm using it towards the right thing instead of using it to just create a whole bunch of distractions from how I actually feel.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, probably every single person has a biography where they can point to, I picked up on this lesson from a little whisper from the universe that wasn't too disruptive. And then we have other lessons that it's like, oh, I had to have a cancer diagnosis or a car wreck. Like something had to really jolt me from my normal.
Yes.
In order for me to get curious about a new normal.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Yeah. So interesting. Okay, because you're a 22-year-old phenom, I'm curious, what do you picture from yourself at 42, 62?
Ooh. I think overall, I would be just happy and content with self-care being in every single school, every single classroom it's being taught, even for the first 5 minutes of class. My high hopes and dreams is that every single kid is able to get access to self-care resources, and every teacher has a program or um, has some kind of materials for them personally in the classroom, because maybe they can't step out for a few minutes from the classroom and go, okay, I need to take a break, I need to recoup. At least they have something at their desk right then and there that they can use to just to relax and to calm whatever it is that they're going through. Maybe it's something. uh, it- I think there's so many things in self-care that can be done just in these schools for the educators and for the students. And I'm actually building some things myself. I'm building a curriculum, which is actually going to be for the teachers and students. So because I think there's just so much that goes on in the educational space itself that there is no, well, actually, I will say for a very long time, I did sit here and say, you know, self-care is not a one size fits all, but sometimes there are things that
Fit
impact
most.
everyone.
Yeah. We know
And
that. Yeah.
I am building a program so that it could help everyone in the school.
Nice. That's such a beautiful goal. I will
Thank
be
you.
tracking and cheering. I can promise you that.
Thank you
and
so much.
like what I hear you over this 45 minutes, I really sense that what you're asking people to do is reclaim their own humanity and the humanity of the people around them, little and big, and trust that when we prioritize that, the rest will follow.
Yes.
Whereas our current culture kind of has that ratio flipped. It's like, do all this, and if you have anything left over at the end, don't forget you're human, and don't forget the kids are human. So I love your invitation to everyone to just get into relationship with their own internal world and get into relationship with young people who have not figured out yet what that even looks like, and shepherd them into knowing how to be active managers of their own nervous system. And it's just incredible. What an honor to know you and get to spend this time with you.
Thank you so much, Miss Michelle, for just having me. I enjoyed this conversation, and it was truly amazing to just be able to share my experience and how teachers and students can really help each other in the classroom.
Thank you. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back, Chris.
Thank you.
Now we have the pleasure of unpacking some of what we learned and what stuck with us. Do you want to start?
Sure. I found some of her comments to be really hard to hear as a parent. And I wonder if you did. And I wonder how educators will feel hearing some of that. I think her message was important, but yeah, hard to hear as an adult. Specifically, just the reminder of how the importance of how you show up and what that does to other people. Because I do think it's so easy to get caught up in the stress of your own life and the circumstances of your own life and be that person that, doesn't have a lot to give to the kids around you at the end of the day. And I know I have done that over the years. And so that really stuck out for me. And so on that note, I think you made this comment through y'all's discussion, but the fact that how grounded we are and how we show up is the single most important thing we have to offer others. And that's just so simply put and really stood out to me.
I feel like if you are in a situation where you sense you have nothing left to give and you cannot get your footing and you can't figure out where to put your attention or energy, the only path for you is to focus on regulating your own nervous system. It's actually true for all of us, but especially if you are feeling depleted and you can't get your footing, like let everything else go. Focus on regulating your own nervous system. If you can get yourself slightly closer to that ventral vagal safe and connected space, slightly a little more unhooked from the survival state of fight, flight, or shutdown, then all of the rest will come and you'll be able to, show up in the way that you want. But if you're putting that at the bottom of your list and just trying to show up in a certain way while simultaneously trapped in a fight, flight, or shutdown survival state, it's not an equation that you're going to win. So if you have limited energy, the step forward move is, what is it that's going to create more signals of safety in your life and either bring energy into your system if you're shut down, or bring calming into your system if you're overactivated in that fight or flight. That's where your focus has to be, which is so directive. I'm not usually that directive, but I know it for sure.
It's directive and it's important. And I think one thing that I have learned lately is that the how paired with that can be as simple as music or exercise or a friend, but it's important work. And then to tie it back to Zara's work, I loved her definition of resilience. And I think you just described what she was saying about what resilience is. It's not just white knuckling through it. It's actually knowing, okay, these are the things for me that are going to get me through the next thing that comes. That I loved just her perspective on that.
so much of what she spoke to intuitively is backed up by the research. Like she really, it was so experiential for her. And I'm sure people feel her in that way. It's like, you know what you're talking about because you're committed to it in your own life, but it aligns with the research. Can I share a little bit about the resilience piece?
Sure, please do.
Because I also had that in my notes. I loved her reframe of resilience. Exactly as you put it, it is what it is. It's not suppression. It's not powering through. She said it's naming what's happening, acknowledging the feeling. What do I need right now? And I loved her question, what brings you comfort? That is such a great shortcut question to knowing what your nervous system needs. What brings you comfort? So I thought her definition of resilience was actually like a super mature definition, and it understood that resilience is about how do you metabolize what's happening to you. There's what happens to us, and then there's how we metabolize what's happening to us. And that's the juicy part. That's the part we have a lot more control over. And then an additional layer that she made me think of is developmental psychologist Ann Maston's work. She looked at resilience and really pushed the psychological community to not place it in the individual and make it sound so much like it's some sort of extraordinary thing if someone is resilient. She calls it ordinary magic. Resilience is ordinary magic, and it emerges from ordinary, steady streams of support working well. So she describes it as at least one stable, caring relationship, basic problem-solving skills, emotional regulation support, a sense of belonging, predictable routines, and community structures that hold. She says resilience doesn't happen inside a head, and it's not about willpower. It happens between people, and it happens because systems are intentional about supporting people. I think that's such an important frame.
I like the words ordinary magic. You had me at magic.
I saw you get your pen out.
I'm very predictable.
Yeah. Isn't that, yeah, she kind of brought all that up for me.
I love that. I also thought her definition of self-care, or just her discussion around self-care, I loved, because I think that those words can often seem very fluffy, and you picture, a Calgon bath if you're old. Zara probably doesn't picture a Calgon
She's going to be like,
what is that? She's
Google.
She's going to AI it. Anyway, my point was you don't use the word self-care. You talk about it from a nervous system standpoint. And I like how she talked about self-care being when you are breaking your own boundaries that you know are beneficial and healthy to you because you're just doing what you want to do. That's a very different definition of self-care. And I think her message of going to educators and encouraging them to help teach that in the classroom, her lens of what self-care is helpful messaging, because I would think that the young recipients of the message would benefit more from Zara's definition of self-care than some of the things that are out there.
Yes, completely agree. I appreciate too that her pivot point when she was an athlete as a freshman, and that was her identity, that my worth comes from this capacity, and then it got interrupted, and that put her on this path toward understanding self-care at that deep level that you described, and then sharing it with others. that really made me think about just identity disrupting events and how
Have you had one recently?
We're both in the middle of one with the lovely, lovely cancer diagnoses. But the gifts of identity disrupting events and how she was able to be awake to that one to the degree that she changed her behavior and changed her life.
Yes.
And how many of us that are in our 40s, 50s, 60s are still like needing to have identity disrupting events before we go, oh my God, my worth is not tied to ... That's
I'm glad
powerful.
it's very powerful. And I'm glad that you verbalized that, because I did feel when watching the interview, one of my thoughts was, how lucky is she that she had that disruption so young? Because I think about that a lot. Like, I'm grateful, however much life I have, that I get to live it from the perspective that cancer has brought to us.
Yeah.
And I can't, like, to think about that from that early age, like, that's amazing. I can't wait to see what she does.
I know. And also kudos to her, because I just had the weirdest, most distracting flashback. One of my former board chairs, whom I adore, used to say kadoos instead of kudos. And we would make fun of him at every board meeting because he'd be like kadoos to so-and-so. And
well, you realize now we're going to do that to you, right?
Kadoos. Andy Smith, one of my favorite people in the world. Kadoos. So kudos or kadoos to Zara, because she actually let that experience level her up in a vertical way. That a lot of us, I mean, I can tell you at many disruptive events that I flirted with leveling up, but then I went very quickly back into the collective coma, and she's not doing that, which is about her.
And not only leveling up individually, but taking it to others.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty cool.
Love it. Okay, so this is the part that I felt like was very hard to hear, was I think you asked a question about what are adults tone deaf around, and her point that kids don't like what's modeled for them and how we're living life. And it was such a message of do whatever it takes to show up with vibrancy and joy, because it's really important. And just in the thinking around educators doing that. But I thought about me as a mother, how I've shown up when I'm really depleted for my kids. And I have honestly heard my daughter say many, many times, I don't want to be an adult. It looks really stressful. She just wants to play. And I think, we need to play as adults, and so that we can show up that way for them.
Yeah. And we need to release the notion that playing equals we won't contribute, or we won't do our work in the world or pay our bills. Like, our generation has really bought into this kind of martyrdom, and
guilty as charged.
Right. Our generation, and by that I mean all of us. But I agree, it was it was a gut punch in the best way, as if that's a thing, but it was I did experience
a disruptive event.
It was disruptive to hear her articulate that we may have created a scenario where an entire generation is saying no thanks.
Right.
No thanks to the way y'all did it.
The simplicity of your comment is what I opened with, that how you show up is the most important thing you can do for others. Mm-hmm. I missed that memo until my late 40s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we miss how much we impact each other below the level of awareness. Mm-hmm. We really miss that. But if we think about it, we get it. Like everyone listening can think of someone who consistently works on their own self and their own stuff to the point where just having them walk in the room lifts the room. And we can think of the opposite.
We can. And I think the exciting part of those realizations paired together is that the fix it or the solution is easy and fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's just looking for joy and taking care of yourself, and that you can do all of that on your own. So yeah, that's
and it's
I
not
feel like
grandiose.
that's the chart. Right. It's not
It
grandiose.
doesn't have to be
it's
grandiose.
doable.
Yeah. It can be very small little things, and knowing what those small little things are for your very unique individual nervous system, like don't sleep on your responsibility to get to know your own nervous system. Because what is soothing and comforting and helpful to one person is going to be dysregulating to another. So you've got to know, what is it that puts me in that safe and connected? What is it that puts me in fight or flight? And what is it that puts me in shutdown? And how do I move, through those different states whenever they show up? In a flexible manner. A flexible nervous system is what we want. We're always going to visit all three, sometimes in a matter of minutes. But do we have the flexibility to not get stuck in like a trauma response or a fight, flight, or shutdown?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things she said, speaking of trauma response, she said that teachers are carrying their own stuff and they're also carrying the stuff of their students. And I don't know a time when that hasn't been more true and more traumatizing. And it made me think about vicarious trauma, which most of our listeners know about, but just in case, I'll share. That's that cumulative impact of being exposed to other people's pain and stress over time. And it, like repeated exposure, actually changes an educator's worldview, nervous system, and sense of safety. Even if they are personally not experiencing the trauma, holding it for a classroom of students who maybe are, that shifts their nervous system state and their worldview and their capacity. And it requires care in the same way we understand that first responders require care and they require backup. We need to understand that teachers are first responders right now, in terms of holding the pain and the fear and the trauma of entire communities.
Wow. That's well said.
I thought so. No, but I do feel passionate about it. I do feel passionate about the things we ask educators to do that are not in the job description, that when we fail to name it, it can make people feel crazy. It can make educators feel like, why don't people understand the complexity of this job? We did an interview with Alejandra Barbosa yesterday, who will air a couple weeks from this one. And she does such a beautiful job talking about the complexity of the educator role. And I can't wait for people to hear from her.
Awesome. I appreciate how you verbalized that, though, because it just makes you think about, and Zara made the comment that how educators show up is more important than the content that they're teaching, which is accessible everywhere, right? Like you can get the information and the knowledge that's being taught anywhere, but how they show up is so important. And yeah, what are we doing to help them show up in the best possible way, knowing that they're carrying all that trauma of others?
Yes, ma'am. What else you got?
I thought that her discussion around comparison culture was also another interesting lens to look through. I mean, even the comment that, kids are thinking they need to have $2 million by 18 because they're comparing themselves to people who are living very different lives than they are. That was interesting in that they're getting their advice from people who have a complete different life. And her encouragement was to educators to help them kind of see the reality of existing circumstances. And I felt like it was a bit of a request for acceptance of real circumstances as opposed to kind of daydreaming, if you will. So I thought that was an interesting charge to educators. One more thing, of course, but very doable if focusing on connection in the classroom.
Yeah. Her describing that made me viscerally understand the difference of having grown up in social media culture versus those of us who were at very different developmental stages when it all came online. Because, I've opted out of all of that and I'm the happiest little clam on the planet. But them opting out is not that's not a thing. And so it's like, how do we help students ground in actual relationships so they can see virtual content and virtual relationships with the clearest eyes is an increasingly important charge.
That made me think of a comment that Zara said before you guys started recording. So I watched it when you asked her when the last time she'd been on a podcast was, and she made the comment that she took a break from her brand for self-care. So she hadn't been on one in a while. Yeah. And I thought just, knowing to establish those boundaries for herself, but yet she's building a brand that she expects to reach 20 million students by 2030. Just interesting that she's aware that those breaks are needed.
Yeah. And she's aware that there has to be coherence between her message and her own nervous system at 22.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow. Remarkable. Okay. We talked about that. I'm looking at my notes.
I felt like her, I don't remember how we got to this point, but the impact of a dysregulated nervous system from an educator on students, the word that she used was distance. It creates distance. It was very powerful, very powerful. And then she described kind of the spiral that a student would then go down thinking they've done something wrong or, they missed the teacher who needs to stay home. But the word distance, I thought, was powerful.
Yeah.
And again, another hard to hear.
Right. And such a dovetail into the co-regulation episode that we posted just last week, that when we disappear emotionally, it has a huge impact on the people around us. That distance is very high cost. Yeah. I only have one last thing, but I don't want to interrupt you if you have lots of other things you want to touch on. Well, I was thinking that getting to spend that time with Zara, there were some reflective questions that I wanted to keep and hold on to and keep alive for myself. So I made a little list. Do you want to hear them?
Great. Yes.
The first is, where have you fused your worth with your output? The second is, what would it mean to separate those even slightly? What is one ritual that helps you regulate my nervous system? Is there a student or colleague that I could offer a moment of co-regulation to? I loved her. I noticed something shifted. What's going on? There's so much gift in that. It's like a sentence or an interaction that carries so much weight, so much power, so much trajectory shifting. It makes me think of Tasha Nickelberry's Be the One. Like you extending that tiny sentence to a student or a colleague can literally shift their nervous system state in a way that is they can kind of keep snowballing in the right direction. Two more. When was the last time you paused long enough to ask yourself what you need? And then the sticky one that I've already referenced, what does comfort look like for you? So I'm putting those on my desk for a few weeks to really
great.
hold myself accountable.
I love those. And maybe Katie can put those in the show notes, because I love that you brought that list up, because one of the things that I made a note about was her very intuitive discussion around how do you know your emotions if you don't sit still with yourself to feel them. And so I think you're giving a guide for what to do in that time that you take. And I appreciated Zara's encouragement of, even if you just started the day with 5 minutes of doing that. It's a lot like Tacky Box time, but for in much more depth. But those questions are a great way to start, and maybe that would help make it easier for our listeners to do that tomorrow with their students.
Yeah, I love that. And I really also appreciated her normalizing how many people are walking around terrified of stillness. Terrified that if
stillness
they stop,
and silence. I think those two things together, the silence piece.
Yeah. And it's understandable. And if they can find a way to just even dip their toe in the water and trust that if some of those things come up that they deeply fear might derail them. Like I've had times in my life, and I know most people have, where I'm like, if I start crying, I will never stop. So I'm not going to start, and I'm not going to give myself space to feel anything I'm feeling. If they trust that stillness and move through whatever rocky period they have, and trust that that's like flushing some things up and out in a completing the nervous system, completing the stress cycle kind of way, that on the other side of that, it will be a different experience with the stillness. They're not always going to feel anxious or overwhelmed or upset. If that's happening, let it come up, let it come out, and then there'll be a different experience of the stillness on the other side. And if that feels too threatening, do it in the presence of a safe enough other. Like borrow that co-regulation, so that you don't have to be in stillness and silence all by yourself, and someone else is kind of helping you hold that space.
Do you promise that's true? Because I cried a lot Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
Yeah.
So you're telling me that next time it's going to be easier?
I promise it will serve you, whatever that means. So if you need 3 more days, then that's what you'll need, and trust that. And then what I can promise you is that your relationship to stillness and silence will shift if you stick with it. And almost without exception, what is coming up needs to come up and needs to come out. And it's that whole, like, the body keeps the score, like, get it up, get it out, trust it. And then also notice how it feels on the other side to have given yourself some permission to release whatever that was. And you don't have to have a story to it. You don't in terms of the somatic experience of releasing things, it doesn't matter what it was. It doesn't matter what it meant, memory it was connected to. None of that matters in terms of the somatic. You're just getting it up and out of your body, and letting your body have that release is gold.
I feel like we're promoting like a cry day for educators or something right now.
We should host like a sob fest.
International Cry Day.
Yes, followed by International Laugh Day, Enjoy Day, sighing. Sighing gives you that release as crying does. Shaking, anything that moves your body. The rhythmic running for me every day, that's a somatic release. It's not just about running. Yeah, all of any of those things we'll host a day for.
I love it. I love it. I think we covered most of the things on my list. I would tie it back to, just that opening comment that how grounded we are is the single most important thing we can do for others.
Yeah. And when I was thinking about her and kind of just like summary, what is she asking of us? I think she's asking us to, in little and big ways, to reclaim our humanity and to support the people around us in reclaiming their humanity. So thank you, Zara.
Yeah, she was amazing. And for listeners who want to connect with her company or movement, her program is called Her Blooming Season.
Fabulous. And as always, please rate, review, subscribe, share. All of those things help us so much in building this community. Also want to remind everybody that Oxygen for Educators magazine is coming out with its first edition end of March. And there's a spot in the show notes where you can request a copy. We will get as many of you in as possible on this front run. And if we don't get you in for the first run, you'll get the second. And it's no cost to you, thanks to Schwab and Atmos and Tacky Box, our amazing sponsors. As always, thank you to Katie, who edits the podcast and helps us with producing. And always thank you to you, Chris.
Thank you to you. And thank you to Sharon Bradley for bringing us Wonder Woman, the 22-year-old Wonder Woman.
Yes. Thank you to Sharon, the wonderful Sharon. If you didn't listen to Sharon's episode, go back. She's extraordinary as well. Thanks, everybody. And thank you, Chris. Bye.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Oxygen for Educators. Please like, share, and follow, and if inclined, leave us a 5-star review so that we can keep making content for you. Let us hear from you if you know someone we should interview or a topic we should cover.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the guest and host and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any organization. The content is provided for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended as professional advice. Listeners are encouraged to use their own judgment and seek appropriate professional support when needed. Oxygen for Educators, its host, and production partners are not responsible for any actions taken based on the information shared in this podcast.